All right, so you want to talk about getting rid of ants, huh? Well, before you go grabbing the strongest bug spray you can find, how about we take a deep dive into the world of ants?
Sounds like a plan. It's important to really understand a creature before you try to control it.
Right. It's like Sun Tzu said, know your enemy. And luckily, we've got some great research here from UC IPM, that's the University of California's Integrated Pest Management Program. And, the first thing they emphasize is knowing exactly what you're dealing with.
Absolutely, because believe it or not all ants are created equal. What works on one type might not work on another.
And you definitely don't want to mistake, like, termites for ants. Although, speaking of termites, our source here actually has a fun way to tell them apart.
Oh, do tell.
Okay, so get this. Ants have those, kind of bent antennae.
Those elbowed antennae, right?
Exactly. Elbowed antenna. Ants have them, termites don't. But it's not just about appearances, is it? I mean, how do their different lifestyles, I guess you could say, play into all of this?
Well, for starters, their food preferences can vary wildly. Some ants are all about those sugary treats.
Oh, yeah, those guys who always seem to find their way into my kitchen.
Exactly. But then you've got other species who are all about protein. And this is crucial when it comes to choosing the right kind of bait. It's like putting out a plate of cookies when what they really want is a juicy steak.
Okay, that makes total sense. You've got to cater to their ant tastes. So you're saying that knowing what kind of ants you've got helps you pick the right bait to, well, lure them to their boom.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Although, and this might come as a surprise, our source does mention that some ants can actually be beneficial to your garden.
Wait, hold on. Beneficial? As in, like, good for my plants?
You heard right. For example, they can actually improve your soil.
Really? How so?
Think of them like tiny little excavators, aerating the soil with their tunnels. That means better drainage and easier access to nutrients for your plants.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. But hold on a second, don't ants love those pesky aphids and mealybugs that suck the life out of my plants?
That they do. They're crazy for that sugary honeydew that those insects produce.
Ah, so the ants are like little farmers, milking their aphid herds for that sweet, sweet honeydew.
That's a pretty good way to put it. And they'll even protect those aphids from predators.
Oh, so it's like a whole protection racket going on in my backyard. But seriously, that's actually really helpful to know, because if I'm trying to manage ants, I need to understand this whole dynamic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that brings us to the fascinating inner workings of an ant colony itself. Yeah, they have this whole complex social structure going on with a queen and workers and even nurseries for their young.
It really is like a miniature city, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so how does knowing, all the ins and outs of ant society, I guess, help us actually get rid of them?
Well, it's not always about getting rid of them entirely, right? I mean, remember, some ants can be beneficial. The real key is management.
Okay, so less all-out war on ants and more like strategic negotiation.
Exactly. And that's where integrated pest management comes in, or IPM, as it's often called. Our source from UC IPM, they're all about this approach.
All right, so lay it on me. What's the IPM game plan when it comes to ants?
Basically, it's all about working smarter, not harder. And a big part of that is addressing, the root cause, right? What's attracting them in the first place.
So instead of just reacting to the ants we see, we need to figure out why they're there.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier, a lot of times those honeydew-producing insects are I guess you could say they're the main attraction.
Right, those sugary little bandits.
Exactly. So step one is getting those populations under control. Because, I mean, if the ant's favorite snack bar shuts down, they'll be a lot less likely to, hang around.
Makes sense to me. But what about those stubborn ants who haven't gotten the memo yet? The ones who are still, staging those tiny marches across my patio.
Well, that's where we can bring in the big guns, ant bait.
Ah, yes. The Trojan horse of the pest control world.
Precisely. But keep in mind, not all baits are created equal. You want to pick one that caters to your specific ant species, right?
Right, like offering a vegetarian ant a steak dinner isn't going to get you very far.
Exactly. You got to, understand your audience. And timing is important, too. Early spring is usually the best time to strike when colonies are smaller.
Gotcha. Get them while they're young and vulnerable. But where do we actually put this, carefully chosen bait?
You got to think like an ant scout. Place it near their trails or entry points, so they just kind of, stumble upon it naturally.
And they think they've hit the jackpot.
Exactly.
Little do they know. It's a trap. So, okay, we've got bait and we're working on managing those honeydew producing fiends. Anything else? Or is that basically it for IPM? What am I missing?
Well, our source also mentions another tool that can be really useful, which is sticky barriers.
Sticky barriers. Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So picture this. Imagine like a protective moat around your prize-winning roses, but instead of water, it's this sticky substance that the ants can't cross.
No more ant highways through my garden. I love it.
It's important to avoid putting it directly on, delicate plants or in areas with direct sunlight. You don't want to accidentally create a new problem while you're trying to solve another one.
Duly noted. So, okay, we've got baits, we've got barriers, and we're managing those honeydew producing, what did you call them? Fiends.
That's one word for them.
Yeah. So that's the IPM approach in a nutshell. Yeah, fiends. I like that. So that's it, huh? We set our traps, put up our defenses, and bam, no more ants.
Well, it's not always that simple, but that's the beauty of IPM. It's not like a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about being being flexible, adapting to the situation.
So what you're saying is, if those ants aren't falling for my carefully placed bait, or they've somehow managed to like breach my sticky defenses, then it's time to what? Go back to the drawing board?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're constantly observing, evaluating and adjusting your strategy based on what those ants are doing. It's like you're playing a friendly little game of chess out there in the garden.
Okay, well, friendly might be pushing it a bit. I don't know if I'd go that far. But I get what you're saying. This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener, by the way. I started out thinking I just wanted to obliterate every ant in sight, and now I'm like kind of in awe of their whole little world.
And that's really the key to effective pest management, right? Understanding those six-legged creatures we share our gardens with.
Speaking of understanding, there's something that kind of struck me when I was reading through this research from UC IPM. I mean, they talk a lot about, managing ants as pests, but it got me thinking, could there be times when it's actually a good thing to have ants around?
That's an interesting question. And it really speaks to the interconnectedness of ecosystems. Remember, we were talking about how they can aerate the soil and even like prey on other garden pests.
Right. So maybe, just maybe, if we can keep those honeydew producing populations in check, then a healthy ant population might not be such a bad thing.
It's definitely something to think about. And it shows just how important it is to think about pest management in a more nuanced way, right?
Yeah.
It's not always, a black and white issue.
I like that. Well said. Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. We went from, basic ant identification all the way to questioning whether they actually have a place in our gardens.
It's been quite the deep dive. And remember, everyone, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to the wonderful world of ants.
You got that right. So until next time, happy gardening, everyone. And may your ant encounters be enlightening rather than infuriating.